welcome to a brand new episode of the Jampack Report, today for November the 8th of 2019. Of course, my name is Samuel Adams, and this is a daily gaming news podcast meant to bring you the hottest stories from around the industry 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, on YouTube, podcast services, and medium.com/JampackReport. Of course, as always, links for everything are down below, so if you enjoy the show, you like what you see or hear, then hit that subscribe button and follow along every single weekday to stay up to date. But with that being said, today we've got some big news to dive into. We've got talk about the PlayStation 5 and how easy it is to code for. Then PlayStation not having any interest in bringing major first-party games to PlayStation Now on day one, in the same way that Xbox Game Studios and, of course, other affiliated companies bring their games to Xbox Game Pass on day one. Then the 3DS's support will continue into 2020. Ninja is defending a banned Fortnite Pro, and we've got even more stories to dive into today. So without further ado, let's go ahead and dive into today's top gaming news. First off, developers are having an easier time coding on the PlayStation 5, according to Jim Ryan. In an interview with GI.biz, PlayStation CEO and President Jim Ryan says based on feedback from developers and publishers, the PlayStation 5 is the easiest PlayStation platform to develop on. One thing that makes me particularly optimistic that what we are hearing from developers and publishers is the ease in which they are able to get code running on PlayStation 5 is way beyond any experience they've had on any other PlayStation platform. Ryan also talks about PlayStation's desire to become a more global organization. He stresses that this doesn't mean the company will become a more American organization. This is apparent with the recent news of Herman Hulst being PlayStation's new head of their worldwide studios. Additionally, we shouldn't expect to see titles that are specific to a certain country. The nature of AAA PlayStation 4 and certainly PlayStation 5 development, we're not obviously going to have worldwide studios make a game for one specific European country, continues Ryan. And that might have been the case back in the PSP times with Invisimals. I think this will be where Shuhei Yoshida's new task of working with indies will come in. If we are nimble, flexible, and global, we can work with smaller developers to allow those countries' specific needs to be met. When we look at this transition and the ambition to do things at a scale and pace that we haven't seen, we have to look at ourselves and make certain changes, continues Ryan. Some of which are in the ways we work and some in the way we organize. Jim Ryan also discusses major first-party titles such as Marvel's Spider-Man and The Last of Us Part 2 may not come to PlayStation Now for the foreseeable future. And of course, they also talk more about Guerrilla Games' Herman Hulst being the new head of Worldwide Studios and Shuhei Yoshida's brand new role, both of which we talked about on yesterday's show. Now, this is pretty big news because right now, in my opinion, there hasn't been too much positive press about the PlayStation 5. Yes, there is a general excitement in the air. Yes, people are anticipating the next generation of consoles. But in my opinion, and in my little ballpark that I tend to play in, that was a weird metaphor, it seems like Project Scarlet, the new Xbox console, is generating a lot more discussion, considering that Xbox Game Pass is definitely picking up steam. On top of that, you also have the acquisition of tons of major game studios coming and being folded into the Xbox Game Studios family. And so I think that right now, any kind of positive press is good press, and to see that developers are having an easier time coding on PlayStation 5 is certainly something that gets me excited, because regardless of the power of a platform, you could have a game that is better optimized on the PlayStation 5, and therefore that is the better place to play. You see this with many first-party games today. Marvel's Spider-Man runs phenomenally on the PlayStation 4 Pro, rivaling a PC in that regard. And so whenever you look at that kind of potential, the accessibility and the ease of access is something that benefits developers and gamers in the long run. But overall, glad to see it, glad to hear it. And of course, it's coming from the Sony PlayStation CEO Jim Ryan, so it could be a bit biased. But hey, who knows? I doubt it. But moving on, we're talking about PlayStation Now, because PlayStation has no interest in following Xbox Game Pass's approach to first-party games. They mentioned this at the end of that most recent article we just went over. As we move ever closer to a new console generation, platform holders have been forced to consider how they can leverage their strengths to make the most of emerging trends. For instance, Xbox's Project xCloud uses Microsoft's Azure technology to enable streaming to mobile devices. Sony understands that PlayStation's two biggest strengths are consistently great first-party games and a massive user base. Because of this, PlayStation is not necessarily gunning to create a subscription service that rivals Xbox Game Pass. Speaking with GI.biz, Sony Interactive Entertainment President Jim Ryan explains the nature and scale of some of the first-party games that we are making leads us to think that, right now, it's better to spend energy on making sure that the launch of those games is a massive entertainment event. I would cite God of War and Spider-Man as examples, and The Last of Us 2 next year will fall into that category. That means PlayStation has no interest in heavily promoting PlayStation Now by including first-party titles as Day 1 editions. One of Xbox Game Pass's defining features is something PlayStation doesn't care to mimic. Given how some of our first-party IP is incredibly special and valuable, we just want to treat them with amazing care and respect and have those launches be clean and pure, Ryan adds. It's a logical stance to take because PlayStation's first-party stuff will sell well. PlayStation is coming from a position of power in that regard, which kind of pushes the allure of a robust subscription service onto the back burner. The mindset might not last forever, though. Sony will have to adapt if subscriptions become what's expected of a platform. To that end, PlayStation Now is better promoted as of late. Last month, Sony slashed the price of PlayStation Now by 40% and added some semi-recent first-party games like God of War and Uncharted 4. Ryan notes, we are taking PlayStation Now very seriously. The commitment we've made in terms of price cuts, the investment in content, the marketing campaign, it's a pretty vivid illustration of that seriousness. Just don't expect PlayStation's biggest games to immediately hit PlayStation Now. That's not the route Sony wants to go. Now, for those that aren't keeping up with the streaming wars, which of course has multiple meanings in today's day and age, you could be talking about Twitch versus YouTube versus Mixer, Netflix versus Hulu versus HBO Max versus Disney Plus. Now, in my opinion, you also have a third streaming war, which is Xbox Game Pass versus Google Stadia and PlayStation Now. But, well, technically Game Pass isn't like PlayStation Now and Stadia, but you understand the point that I'm trying to make here. The draw of Xbox Game Pass for a lot of people is the fact that major games are included as Day 1 launch titles. And I'm talking about stuff like The Outer Worlds. I'm talking about stuff like Gears of War 5. Of course, you have many of the Xbox branded games coming to Xbox Game Pass on Day 1, making it one of the most desired services, in my opinion, for gamers in the modern day. And of course, they go all in with big discounts. I mean, I had 2 months of Xbox Game Pass Ultimate, which includes Xbox Live Gold, Xbox Game Pass for console, and Xbox Game Pass for PC for $2. They are really trying to grow the install base, and quite frankly, they're doing a fantastic job. That is what Xbox is trying to do going forward, because if you do get Project Scarlet next year and you have Xbox Game Pass, you automatically have access to a library of games. You have access to everything you need to get up and running for a low monthly fee on top of the console purchase. And then on top of that, they also have their all-access program, which gets you a console as well as the services and whatnot. But with PlayStation, they seem to be going a more traditional route where they do hype up their biggest games. They do say, hey, huge marketing push on God of War, Spider-Man, The Last of Us 2, and that really does generate hype. And therefore, instead of having people subscribing to this service and being brought into the family, they're giving 60 to 80 to 100, depending on what version of the game they buy, dollars to the company at hand. And then it's a cut and dry kind of transaction, as it tends to be in the most recent kind of era of gaming. And so it's two different approaches going into the next console generation, both of which could be successful. I'm not really sure which way it's going, but if we're talking about the value for the consumer, Xbox Game Pass is without a doubt one of the biggest values, and to have giant launch day games added to the library on the same day that they hit store shelves, that is a very, very big draw for a lot of people, including myself. So PlayStation Now on the right track, but if it is going to be competing with Xbox Game Pass, I don't know how big of a delay you are going to be able to have between games releasing and then them being added to the service later on. And of course, with the discount, that makes it even less enticing to add giant AAA games to the service on Day 1. So ultimately, it's a better deal right now. Tons of people jumping on PlayStation Now, considering just how big the library is. But needless to say, the streaming wars in the console space, they're really heating up. But you can't stream anything to the Nintendo 3DS, but you could be getting some more games because Nintendo 3DS support will continue into 2020. The launch of the fully portable Nintendo Switch Lite has reinvigorated questions that first arose alongside the original Switch's launch surrounding the company's plans for its 3DS line of handhelds. With new titles for the 3DS, While new titles for the 3DS have certainly slowed down since the Switch launched, Nintendo of America President Doug Bowser tells The Verge that the company is not planning on backing away from the platform in the near future, at least as long as consumers are interested in the 3DS. We continue to look at the 3DS family, both hardware and games, as a strong entry point for some consumers, Bowser tells The Verge. And we're seeing that. As long as a consumer demand is there, we'll continue to provide both hardware and software on that front. Nintendo has largely maintained that the 3DS and Switch aim to serve different corners of its audience, often referring to the nearly 9-year-old family of handhelds as an affordable entry point for families and those new to video games. To that end, Bowser says that Nintendo doesn't yet consider the 3DS, in The Verge's words, a dead platform, and that its current plans see it supporting the 3DS this holiday and into 2020. So in my mind, this is something that is certainly on its way out, but that does still have value. Of course, in my mind, if you have a young kid, maybe a nephew or a niece, some younger person that is wanting to get into gaming for the first time, a 3DS or a 2DS is incredibly affordable. It has a giant library of games, and it is one of the best ways to get into the space. Now, that is going to be a valid statement until the Nintendo Switch Lite sees a price drop or until more people begin picking up Nintendo's newest piece of hardware. Of course, the Nintendo Switch Lite is pretty much the killer of the Nintendo 3DS and the 2DS, in my opinion, because for $200, you get access to the growing library of Nintendo Switch games on a very nice-looking little piece of hardware. But even with that being taken into consideration, Nintendo's 3DS is still one of the biggest handhelds to date. It's got a giant global install base, and of course, with more people playing video games now than ever before, any kind of console is going to pretty much do well, even if it is something that's a little bit older. But again, with the giant library, with the giant install base, it's no surprise to see Nintendo continuing to support the 3DS. But my question is, what about 2021? I doubt we'll be seeing support into 2021, but I could be wrong about that one. However, Ninja is defending Faze Jarvis, saying he shouldn't be banned from Fortnite permanently. Popular Fortnite pro and streamer Faze Jarvis was pasted with a permanent ban from the game last weekend for using an aimbot in the Solos Battle Royale mode. By all appearances, he was just, quote, dicking around, according to PC Gamer, but he made no effort to hide the cheating and in fact made a video about it. But rules is rules, as they say, and Epic was very clear that it has a zero tolerance policy when it comes to cheating. It's a heavy penalty for a guy whose career relies on the game. Too heavy in the opinion of Fortnite mega streamer Tyler Ninja Blevins. Speaking during a recent streaming session clipped by Daily Clip Central, Blevins said that Jarvis' status as a high-profile content creator should entitle him to considerations and modified penalties not offered to typical players. There's a difference between a content creator who has millions of subscribers, hundreds of thousands of followers, who gets banned from what literally makes him money, and some kid who is just a piece of shit, who has absolutely zero following, has zero money that comes from Fortnite, from gaming and hacks, Ninja said. You ban that kid, nothing happens to him. Nothing happens. Oh no, he can't cheat anymore. You ban Jarvis, it's different. The stakes are different. It should be handled a little bit differently. Ninja emphasized that he doesn't think Jarvis should get off scot-free, but rather than a permanent ban, he suggested that a suspension in the range of 3 months to a year is more appropriate. He's still super young. I think it's just a stupid kid making a stupid decision. Didn't really fully think about it. It wasn't in a tournament, it wasn't a cash cup, it wasn't anything like that, he said. Despite the ring of elitism that comes with suggesting content creators be treated differently, I think Ninja has a point, the author says. 17-year-olds aren't renowned for their decision-making capabilities, and Jarvis obviously wasn't trying to get away with using an aimbot. He literally made a public video about doing it. He's young. There are people who have done worse things on the internet in different areas and haven't gotten banned. I use Logan Paul as a reference. The dude literally filmed someone hanging in a forest, and his channel didn't get banned, and he's been perfectly fine. He uploaded an apology video, and he was set, Ninja said. There are lines, man. I think this is one where it's like, Jarvis, dude, you're an idiot. 6-month ban, maybe 3 months. First offense, young kid. Come on, man. End quote. Epic Games declined to comment on Ninja's opinions. And of course, that is coming to us from Green Man Gaming via PC Gamer. I disagree with this one most wholeheartedly. Let's be very clear about something here. If you cheat, you're a cheater. Now, I don't care if you're doing it professionally. I don't care if you're doing it in your spare time in your parents' basement. If you use an aimbot in the game and it's against the terms of service, you probably need to face the crime. And if you can't do the crime, don't do the time. Or if you can't do the time, you know what I'm saying here. The dude's a cheater, so therefore he needs to be given some kind of ban. Now, a permaban, that's the big question here. I don't like the fact that Ninja defended him by saying that content creators are kind of on a different scale or on a different level, because they're not. No one is subject to a different set of rules just because of the fact that they create content. And on top of that, I might not be deeply invested in the Faze community. I might not be deeply invested in the esports community. But this kid is 17. I've never heard of him at all. I don't even know who this kid is. He cheated in Fortnite. I'm sorry, you're banned. That's just kind of how it is in my book. Again, if you don't want to be banned, you probably shouldn't cheat. That's really what it comes down to. And that's, again, the exact same reason I brought up the story earlier in the week. I want to bring it up again to remind you all, don't cheat in your video games. Don't cheat in life. Don't cheat on your test. Don't cheat on your entry exam. Don't cheat in work. Whatever you're doing, cheaters never win. They always get caught. And if they don't, then they could end up in a political office somewhere. But all of that being taken into consideration, Ninja defends Faze Jarvis. I mean, just look at that face. How can you ban somebody that looks like that? Such a sad, sad tale. However, moving on, Grand Theft Auto 5 has sold a staggering 115 million copies, more than total PS4 console sales. We recently reported, they say, a PlayStation Lifestyle, that the PlayStation 4 has become the second best-selling console on the market, selling more than 102 million units worldwide since its launch back in November of 2013. But Take-Two has a number to beat that. Grand Theft Auto 5 sales have reached more than 115 million units worldwide across all platforms since its initial release back in September of 2013. Even considering both the current gen upgrade that the game got along with the PC version, that is a staggering number for a game that continues to sell well despite being more than 6 years old. In fact, at last check-in, Grand Theft Auto 5 had reached 110 million back in May of this year, which means Rockstar managed to move 5 million additional copies of its game just in the last 6 months. Most developers would be thrilled to hit that number in total lifetime sales, let alone a 6-month period, a half-decade after their game released. Using other Take-Two games as reference points, Borderlands 3 saw 5 million in sales within 5 days of launch, currently at 7 million total sold. And Red Dead Redemption 2 sales sit at 26.5 million after launching 1 year ago. While impressive, those are still barely a fraction of the numbers boasted by Grand Theft Auto 5, a game that continues to top the charts month after month and year after year. Revenue is not just driven by Grand Theft Auto 5 sales. However, the game includes GTA Online, a huge live service experience that brings ongoing revenue via microtransactions. A good chunk of the reported 74% net revenue increase for Q2 that Take-Two reported year over year. GI.biz reports that digitally delivered net bookings for Q2 were up 63% year over year to $695 million, and that digital made up 73% of the company's total $950 million net bookings in Q2. Of course, you can read more about this on gi.biz via the, of course, report on the Take-Two earnings. But Grand Theft Auto 5 selling a staggering 115 million copies within 6 years. That is something that still blows my mind. I mean, I read through a lot of sales figures. I read through a lot of reports, but every single month, it seems like Grand Theft Auto 5 is something that I mention. I talk about this game on a weekly to monthly basis, and to see it continuing to boast very, very popular sales, very, very impressive sales 6 years after launch is something that doesn't shock me again, because whenever I think about generic video game that people like to play, Grand Theft Auto 5 is pretty much the go-to because it is so open, it is so versatile. You can pretty much do anything in it. I mean, from the emerging role-playing scene to the ever-growing list of just crazy stuff you can do in the game. I mean, just the stunts. GTA Online has opened up an entirely new era for Grand Theft Auto 5. It's just something that blows people away. And so, if you do want to dive in, again, Grand Theft Auto 5 still on sale on the PS4, Xbox One, of course the Xbox 360 and the PS3 as well on top of the PC, and it's now sold over 115 million copies. But a new Mass Effect game could be on the way. It's not, but it could be. Could a new Mass Effect game be on its way? They ask at GamesRadar.com. Bioware teases the possibilities. A tweet from Mass Effect game director Casey Hudson sure makes it seem like there's a new game in the works. Hudson took to Twitter to celebrate N7 Day, a community day appropriately on November 7th that's named after the game's vocational military code. N means special forces, while 7 is its highest level one can reach. For the last few years, N7 Day has felt more like a funeral than a celebration. However, as we've waited for a new game that could get the taste of Andromeda out of our mouths. This tweet, however, could change things. He says, and I quote, "We have so many ideas for things we want to do in Mass Effect, so much concept art that hasn't yet been brought to life, and so many stories to tell. I want to make something very clear. This tweet, yet again, of course, the headline of the article, could a new Mass Effect game be on its way? Literal statement in the article, hasn't yet been brought to life. The only word here is yet that gives you any kind of hope, but at the same time, nah, there's not one coming. That being taken into consideration. Casey Hudson was game director on the Mass Effect trilogy in its entirety, so there is no better person to reassure us that there are so many ideas and so many stories yet to tell. But let's unpack this concept art, which is slightly confusing. The first picture depicts a human seemingly in N7 armor standing in a forest near a downed structure. Is that Reaper tech? In the background is what looks to be the Mako, a land vehicle deployed to help traverse planets with another human-like figure crouching on top of it, and a Krogan standing right in front of it. Certainly seems like concept art from the original trilogy, or at least concept art set in the same time frame. And they go on to break down the rest of the pictures. You can check them all out on Casey Hudson's actual Twitter account. But it seems like something could be in the works. But I think that's pretty much something that is general public knowledge. I don't know that this was necessarily a newsworthy piece of content. I wanted to talk about it just to say that, yes, you will see articles saying a new Mass Effect game is on the way. Concept art has been revealed. Not necessarily. Again, this is just nothing more than concept art in and of itself. It could be something that's in the works. It could be something that was canned. You never really know whenever it comes to concept art. Now, of course, right now, Bioware in a very strange position, considering that Anthem just shit the bed entirely. And then on top of that, before that, Andromeda very much so let fans down across the board. And so, a new Mass Effect game would be a welcome change as long as it was handled appropriately. Go ahead and maybe reboot the franchise. Go ahead and bring back what fans loved, because that's what people are missing. It seems like we haven't had something that has really catered to the core fan base of Bioware in quite some time. But between Mass Effect and Dragon Age, I think it's going to be a very interesting next couple of years for Bioware. Could be one of the biggest comebacks in modern-day gaming. However, if you are in the spirit of Death Stranding and you still want to go back to Days Gone, congratulations, BB is in Days Gone now. You must protect BB from the freakers. Death Stranding comes to PS4 today, but it won't be the only game that will let you transport a bridge baby across treacherous lands while undead creatures try to kill you. No, you'll be able to do the same. Okay, similar thing in open-world biker survival game Days Gone. Bin Studio, which contributed to Death Stranding's development along with Guerrilla Games, is adding Death Stranding-inspired bike tanks, decals, and frame paint to Days Gone with patch 1.6. Those free cosmetics include a tank with BB inside, which kind of gives you the impression that BB is just floating around in some 87-octane gasoline. You can see 2 of those new Death Stranding tanks in Bin Studios' tweet down below. Now, of course, this is pretty much what you'll get from the overall experience, so it is what you would expect. There is a tank with BB inside of it right there in the crotch of your bike, as I like to call it. But yeah, you just jump on, and then, of course, you've got the other Death Stranding kind of tank there. And then on top of that, you've got the photo frames and whatnot. But overall, Death Stranding, a very big game. It seems like it's generally a hit or a miss for a lot of people. Some people love it, some people loathe it, some people are in the middle about it. But generally, from what I've seen on Twitter, a lot of streamers, which are a pretty good way to judge the general public's perception of a game, tend to be digging it. Some people say it's just weird and I don't get it, but for some reason I like it. That could be your experience as well. But if you do want to dive in, again, Death Stranding is out today, but if you want to dive into Days Gone, it's out now as well, and it's been out since around February. But generally, a pretty good game overall, and now you've got BB in there, so even better. But maybe you don't want to play any of that. Maybe you want to play some Nuclear Throne or Ruiner. They are free on the Epic Games Store. I hope you remember to pick up Costume Quest and Soma for free from the Epic Games Store, because if you didn't, you missed your chance. The good news is, as the old saying goes, when one window closes, somebody throws a big rock through another one, and so it is that Nuclear Throne and Ruiner are now up for grabs for the week. Vlambeer's Nuclear Throne is an outstanding top-down roguelike shooter about mutants doing high-explosive battle for their titular throne. It's a few years old now, but one of the advantages of retro-style graphics is that they tend to age well since they're effectively pre-aged at release, and its final update was actually released near the end of 2017, only a couple of years ago. The second selection, Ruiner, is also a top-down action game, but bears a far more modern visual style, with a color palette that reaches deep into the cyberpunk spectrum of neon-hued, primaries and oversaturated artificiality. It's a different sort of violent experience, a katana rather than a dushka, but the bottom line is the same. Kill until you die. I've played both of these and they're free until November the 14th on the Epic Games Store. Without a doubt, Nuclear Throne is phenomenal. Ruiner, also a good game, not quite as good in my opinion as Nuclear Throne, but different kinds of experiences overall. However, they're free, so you better go pick them up because even if you don't want to play them now, you might want to play them later, and you might as well add them to your library. Again, Nuclear Throne, whew, Lord, that's a good game. But with that being said, that rounds out today's episode of the Jampack Report. I hope you enjoyed this one as always, and if you did, drop me a like down below, and of course, follow on Twitter, on YouTube, on all of the podcast services, whatever you need to do to get the show delivered to you every single weekday. I would appreciate it very much. Of course, links where everything are down below, but until Monday, you guys have a phenomenal rest of your weekend. I will talk to you soon, and peace.